Elishnish frowned down at the file handed over to her by her new agent as she wandered through the streets of the central district. Within was a map showing the location of her new assignment, a brief overview of Lady Sheltier's expectations, and a new notebook. Supposedly, she was being assigned there to be mentored by another of Lady Sheltier's subordinates in a variety of subjects that did not look very interesting at all. Maybe they meant something entirely different from what she knew? It happened sometimes, usually to her own chagrin. Eventually she found herself at the postal office in the demi-human quarter. Why did she always end up here? And exchanged her greetings with the counter staff before heading through the warehouse and up to the top of the wall. Since she was here, she should probably check if Hedgenmole had discovered anything interesting out of the books she had left with him. Rather than being shut into his room like usual, his head was sticking out of it, facing away from her. What are? Hi. Her brother's head jerked up in fright, then swiveled towards her. She backhanded him in the jaw before he bowled her over. Hedgenmole's eyes swirled for a moment before focusing on her. You must have sensed me coming from at least the entrance, brother. I sensed someone, Hedgenmole replied, but I had no idea it was you. Besides, you just spoke up all of a sudden like that. Preposterous, Elishnish snorted. No true dragon would be frightened by that. If you don't shape up in various ways, you're going to have trouble winning a female for yourself. Hedgenmole was slowly becoming more fit in appearance, but the way he carried himself was still sorely lacking. That such a timid individual was her brother did not sit well with her. Maybe a word with Lady Aura would fix that. A female. Hedgenmole frowned. For me? No, wait, more importantly, something is going on with Mother. Elishnish blinked at his words, then she waved her hand dismissively. I hardly think that anything could happen to her, she said. Unless, did she draw Lady Sheltier's eye somehow? No, it's nothing like that. Then what? It started recently, Hedgenmole told her. A gentleman has been visiting her. What? Shh. He comes by around this time of the day. What are you doing? This is my room, you know. Shh. Elishnish poked her head out from the door of Hedgenmole's room, eyeing the way to her mother's room. What color is he? She asked after several minutes of nothing happening. Color? Why do you have to ask? White. He's white, or close to it. Elishnish nodded silently to herself at Hedgenmole's answer. Various calculations started forming in her head. Sister, could it be that you're trying to get your claws on him? Yes? I'm not strong enough to directly challenge Mother yet, but I can still grab him after she's done. Now that just sounds wrong, Hedgenmole made a face. Besides, didn't you just lay your eggs, sister? What's wrong with it, brother? Elishnish sniffed at a new scent that wafted through the hall. If he's not related to us, then he's fair game. Anyways, I just need to know how to find him the next time I'm good and ready. Is he any good, by the way? Good, Hedgenmole sighed. Sister, I don't think. A serpentine figure appeared at the opposite entrance. It was white, but... Hedgenmole, Elishnish said. Is that the gentleman? Yes, sister, Hedgenmole replied. He's not even a dragon. Elishnish hissed up at him. Why do you keep doing this to me? Me? Aren't you the one always jumping to conclusions? What else would I think if Mother was seeing a gentleman? This is the second time you've done this, brother. The Naga's tail disappeared into Calistran's quarters, and the door shut softly behind him. Elishnish withdrew with a sigh, back into Hedgenmole's room. She found a nice-looking chair in one corner and took a seat. Wait, why is there a chair in here? The bookshelves made sense. The chair did not. Was he learning some method to change his appearance? It's Lady Aura's chair, Hedgenmole told her. Sometimes she comes by to see me. See you? Because you're her pet. Elishnish leaned back over the chair and stretched, letting out a tired noise. She examined the titles lined up on the shelves. I am, but you don't have to make it sound like that. Hedgenmole's offended tone gave Elishnish pause. Could it be that he actually liked being a pet? How else am I supposed to react? Elishnish straightened and crossed her arms. My big brother was turned into a pet. I feel mortified by association. How does that even happen, anyways? It just did. I had no say in it. It's just as I said before, His Majesty just told Lady Aura I'll give you this dragon, and that was that. Ilishnish crinkled her nose up at her brother before deciding that his situation wasn't worth thinking about. She rose to her feet, sticking a hand into her infinite haversack as she walked up to the bookshelves. I'm being reassigned, brother, she told him as she added several recent purchases to an empty shelf. Reassigned? In what way? A new residence, Ilishnish answered, someplace not far south. I've never been there before, but the vampire bride said, MMH, have you heard about these agents that they've set over us? I don't think they've been set over us, Hegenmill said. They're more like helpers, or maybe something like a liaison. They check to see if there's anything we need, what sort of things we'd like, delivering news and updates on the things we're interested in. They'll even go into the city and pick things up for us. Her own agent had done no such thing, all she received from her was orders. It sounds as if they're just trying to keep everyone docile. You're always so cynical, sister, Hegenmill told her. It's not as if they need to do all this. They could have kept us in those pens from before and flew us around endlessly without breaks. I don't think this new room is bad at all. Compared to the rooms in the Dwarven Palace that they had lived in for the last century, this one was roughly the same size, but inferior in craftsmanship despite also being constructed by dwarves. Aside from the bookshelves and the chair, the rest of its contents were decidedly lacking. There was, well, pretty much nothing else, except for a single small object in the middle of the floor. Why is there a gold coin on the floor, brother? Why else would there be a gold coin on the floor, sister? Ilishnish's soul recoiled in pity, and her hands went up to hide her face. Are you telling me that you're sleeping on a single gold coin? Her voice quivered. That's so sad. You're going to make your sister cry, Hegenmill. Aye, it's a start. Hegenmill's claws came up in a consoling gesture. Besides, our parents never let us keep any coins back at our own place. I know, Ilishnish sniffed, but only having one somehow makes it so much more lonely. We're getting paid now, so it will change, yes? Please don't cry, sister. Ilishnish peeked up at him from between her fingers. How much are you getting paid? They said something about a rate based on something, maybe it was by route. Also, courier jobs pay more since they're worth more. I don't think anyone has voiced any complaints over it. It's a steady, safe job and we'll be able to slowly build up our hoards in the process. We have unlimited time to work and collect more. It wasn't as if she couldn't understand where Hegenmill was coming from, but, after observing human society on and off for 2 months, it felt as if dragons were just being slowly bent to human ways. Their insidious systems were an excellent way to integrate lower species with minimal fuss, but she never wanted to end up in that position herself. Trying to figure out a way to stay out of that mess and remain standing above the rest was an ongoing investigation. Let me know how that works out for you, I suppose, Ilishnish said non-committally. I need to get going and figure out where this new place is. I've left some books on the Empire here. Lady Shiltier wants me to start visiting places there soon, so try and find some useful information for me. I'll see what I can do. Does that mean we'll have some routes to the Empire soon? The dwarves had most of their dealings with them, so I'd like to see what's been mentioned in their records someday. Someday, probably. How soon would depend on Lady Shiltier. They exchanged their farewells, and Ilishnish walked out onto an open section of the wall as she examined the map that was provided to her. A good portion of it was familiar, as it covered the lands that she crossed over to unknowingly deliver supplies to the adventurer camp some time ago. Her destination was at the end of the valley that she had seen south of there. Nodding silently and putting away the file, she returned to her dragon self and took off into the rainy night. Inclement weather meant little to frost dragons, affecting neither her ability to fly nor the visibility of her surroundings. The world below, however, had slowed to a crawl, the busy night markets turning subdued and the few travelers willing to brave the weather carefully picking their way over the slick stones of the highways. The rain tapered off as she crossed over the northernmost point of the southern ranges that could be seen from Iranthal, and she descended to take in its features more closely. The mountains here were perhaps half as tall as those in the Azalisia ranges, and lacking in ice fields or glaciers. Above the tree line was an abundance of small lakes and vibrant alpine meadows. Her keen draconic senses detected movement below. Sheep. I haven't had sheep for a while. Her people were allowed to hunt in the Azalisia Mountains and the Great Forest of Tob. Could they hunt here as well? The mountains bore no sign of any structures or tribal habitation. The sheep below went back and forth, tickling her hunter's instincts. They didn't look like they were anyone's livestock. It probably wouldn't hurt to take one. Elishnish circled lazily overhead until she picked out a particularly fat one standing exposed on an outcropping. It didn't quite look like the mountain sheep that could be found in the Azalisia Mountains, but she supposed that it might just be a different species. She folded her wings, angling straight down towards her prey. Rather than scatter, a dozen or so of the mountain sheep started to converge on the individual she was diving upon. That was strange. Inferno. The sheep bleated a spell, and Elishnish's world burst into flame. She cried out, snapping her wings open to abruptly level off and gain altitude again. Her mind was a panicked jumble and she kept turning her head to look over her burning form as she flapped about frantically. I'm on fire. What should I do? It burns. It hurts. It doesn't hurt? It didn't hurt, and her body wasn't burning away. Why was that? She recalled the great ring of fire resistance that had been issued to every frost dragon in the transportation network, including herself. The amount of damage caused by the spell that was afflicting her did not exceed the threshold of damage reduction conferred by the ring. Elishnish let out an evil laugh. Useless. She mocked the sheep below. I feel not your paltry flames. Now witness the wrath of the fiery frost dragon. She folded her wings again for another dive, descending towards the peak like a blazing comet. The sheep below only looked back up at her. A sense of imminent danger filled her awareness. Call thunder. She swerved slightly, and a bolt of lightning flashed down through her former flight path. It blasted a scorch mark onto the mountain face below. Huh? Call thunder. 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 Elishnish evaded madly, desperately trying to avoid being struck by lightning. What sort of insane individual would teach sheep tear magic? Her pained gasp filled the air as a bolt scored a painful line over one of her wings, then a hole was punched through the other. She dove to pick up speed, quickly distancing herself from the dreadful sheep. Then her breath caught in her throat as more of them appeared ahead. They fly? What sort of insane place is this? Why are the sheep flying and casting tear magic? Please leave me alone. Call thunder. Call thunder. Call thunder. Call thunder. She continued her panicked descent, picking up velocity. Her only hope was to get through the gauntlet of these hellish sheep as quickly as possible. The ones she passed, however, descended after her. They're chasing me? Sheep are chasing a dragon? This is a dream, right? In no sane world do sheep chase dragons around. Call thunder. Hi. She was running out of sky. Below, the wide river filled her vision. Elishnish leveled out again, streaking past the next set of murderous flying sheep. Call thunder. Web. What? Web. Sticky filaments bound themselves to her wings, and she struggled to maintain flight. She couldn't get away like this. Folding her wings tightly to her sides, she plunged into the river. They don't swim, do they? Please tell me they don't swim. Above the surface, she could sense the murky impressions of dozens of sheep hovering over the river like a swarm of angry hornets. After a minute, none joined her underwater. Good, they didn't swim. Elishnish made her way upstream, trying to figure out where she was. She should be close. She recalled a hill with dwellings of some sort near where she had entered the river. All at once, the presence of the sheep vanished, disappearing up into the sky above. She cautiously poked her head out of the water. That was quite the entrance. A familiar voice chimed out over the water. As expected of a talented bard, Elishnish shook away the rivulets of water streaming down her head and neck, and her senses resolved the surroundings. Nearby, Lady Shaltir stood upon an earthen pier in her usual black gown. To her side was a human with chestnut hair that hung just below her shoulders. Her forest green dress gave off an entirely different impression from the sort of formal garb that female humans tended to wear in New Rantel. Elishnish swam over, struggling to free her wings of the sticky webbing along the way. Lady Shiltir, Ilishnish reported in plaintive tones, there are violent ruffians living in these mountains. Lady Zaradnik, Lady Shiltir said, I believe she wishes to report a grievance with your subjects. Her subjects? Ilishnish sized up the human. She was about as strong as the adventurers on the expeditionary force from earlier in the day. Most of the sheep were at least as powerful, some of them were far more powerful than Ilishnish, as she had belatedly realized. Why would these terrifying sheep submit to the rule of someone so weak? The Kronos do have a history with dragons, Lady Zaradnik said. It may have just been a misunderstanding. I will have a word with them later. Are you injured? I have some healing potions on hand. There's no need, Lady Shiltir said. Dragons are also far more durable than humans, so trying to empathize with them along human lines will result in your being taken advantage of. Also, she has a ring of regeneration. Ah, right. That's part of their equipment, isn't it? That's all you'll do? Ilishnish cut in. I believe the penalty for committing acts of violence in the Sorceress Kingdom is far more severe than that. The human female remained silent for a handful of seconds. Was she going to try and cover for these evil sheep? She wondered what it would take to qualify for such exceptions to the law. Of course, Lady Zaradnik said. Just one moment, please. I will call for an elderlich and we will use mind control to take your state. It was a misunderstanding. I beg your pardon? A misunderstanding. I see. Did she? Unlike the usually expressive humans that she usually encountered, this one was unusually placid. Lady Shiltir seemed a bit more reserved than usual, as well. What was going on here? Was there a game of some sort being played, one she did not know the rules to? Was this what she was here to learn? Well, don't just float there, Lady Shiltir said. Get up onto the shore and make a proper greeting. Ilishnish went around the pier. Her right rear leg somehow got entangled with her right wing along the way to the pebbled shore, and she had to hop her way up. Freedom. The strands of sticky webbing fell off, or rather they fell through her to disintegrate on the ground. Thank you, Lady Shiltir. Hurry it up. Her gaze went from Lady Shiltir to the human. What was that about a proper greeting? My name is Shiva, pleased to meet you. Lady Shiltir turned her gaze towards Lady Zaradnik. No good, the human said. She won't pass for anything but a commoner with that. I thought so, Lady Shiltir sighed. I suppose you have your work cut out for you. I wasn't sure what to expect, my lady, Lady Zaradnik replied, but she's even worse than Chieftain when he first arrived. He's progressing well now, no? He is progressing well relative to where he needs to be, but someone in the position that you intend for Miss Verilyn will require a much higher degree of refinement. This human knew her name? Why would Lady Shiltir tell her that? Well, do what you think is best to train her, Lady Shiltir said. She's due to start going around the Empire in a few months. I still believe that Wagner would be more suited for this, especially with the Empire being the next target. For a few things, certainly, but then there's everything else. You're the best fit for the job. Once you've covered everything else, you may consult with Wagner for the rest. Yes, my lady. Lady Shiltir's gaze turned to Ilishnish. Why are you still sitting there like that? She frowned. Assume a more appropriate appearance. Ilishnish's eyes drifted to the nearby human, but Lady Shiltir's frown only deepened. Ilishnish let out a quiet sigh as she complied, switching to her human appearance. Lady Zaradnik's expression did not change, but she did raise a hand to tap her chin. Interesting, wasn't she the one that was spreading those frost giant rumors? The same, Lady Shiltir said. You need not worry about reprimanding her for that, I've already settled the matter. This human would reprimand her? Ilishnish didn't like the way their conversation was going. Lady Shiltir, she asked, I thought this was a reassignment for my new residence and some sort of arrangement to learn some things. It is, Lady Shiltir nodded. Lady Zaradnik is eminently suited to your training. She will oversee your development into an individual who is qualified to represent my interests in your journeys abroad, should you be required to. You will come to understand and adopt the attitudes of propriety and service that will be expected of someone in your position. Lady Zaradnik has been granted free reign over you for these purposes, so be forewarned, she is a much more stern mistress than I am in certain ways. Train, why are you putting her over me like this? Elishnish asked. Have I displeased you in some way? Don't tell me it's about the Advan. Nothing. Elishnish quickly said, it's just that it feels like you're giving me to her or something. Lady Shiltir blinked up at her for several moments, then that slight smile of hers appeared. A sinking sensation filled Elishnish's stomach. Lady Zaradnik, Lady Shiltir said. I'll give you this dragon. You don't have a single pet yet, if I recall correctly. What? Thank you for your consideration, my lady, Lady Zaradnik said, but is she not one of His Majesty's frost dragons? It's true that Lord Ines placed them all under me, Lady Shiltir replied, but this one came in on her own later. Something like a bonus? What of her service to you? What's yours is mine, yes? Yes, my lady. The human didn't even hesitate in the slightest with her reply. What sort of deranged individual was she being inflicted with? Then it's no problem at all, Lady Shiltir beamed. She can be your pet, or your vassal? Can she be both? How does that work for buffs? I have no idea about that, Lady Zaradnik replied. Perhaps we can make a study of it. You do that, I'm sure many would be most interested in the results. Elishnish stepped forward, holding her hands up weakly. How could she stop this? She didn't want to become a hegemon. What about me? Elishnish asked, don't I have a say? No, Lady Shiltir answered. Actually, there's one other thing. Go stand beside your new mistress, Elishnish. Elishnish did as she was told, despondently shuffling over to stand beside the human. Elishnish was a bit taller than the average human female in Irantal, but the top of her head was only about as high as Lady Zaradnik's nose. Lady Shiltir's gaze traveled back and forth between them. This is wrong, she said after scrutinizing them carefully. The image is off. Image, my lady? Lady Zaradnik said. Indeed, Lady Shiltir nodded. Don't you think her breasts are far too large compared to yours? Lady Zaradnik turned to examine Elishnish, her face a neutral mask. She's a bit smaller than Gonye, but... Didn't you swear to be truthful with me in all things that mattered? Yes, my lady. Lady Zaradnik turned her head away with a dissatisfied look. It does make me envious, even adding just a little bit of it to my own would be nice. See, that didn't hurt, did it? No, Elishnish said, it will definitely hurt if you take even a little bit of this. In this case, Lady Shiltir told Elishnish, we'll just have to have you shrink. Shrink? Yes, become flatter. I can't do that. Why not? Because this is me, Elishnish explained. It's how I would appear as a member of the human race. I can make some minor adjustments, but... Then do it. With a whimper and a persecuted look, Elishnish cut herself down by a half centimeter with substantial effort. Not good enough, Lady Shiltir frowned. At least half no, 2/3. Impossible, my lady. Elishnish cried, this is as far as I can go. Then what about a more slender race? The human asked, an elf, perhaps? Elishnish had only seen a handful of elves. Lord Mer and Lady Aura were children, if what she understood was correct. Mary was a mean and nasty female that Elishnish thought was at least thrice her own age. Beyond them, elves were nearly unheard of in Irantal, only paintings and sculptures of dubious authenticity existed of them. She licked her lips before raising her voice in song, trying to conceptualize herself as an elf. Her height changed imperceptibly, but she grew lighter. Should she continue using her Fuyotsuki? Too big. Elishnish's eyes popped open, and she looked over at Lady Shiltir. My lady? Too big. Lady Shiltir placed her hands on her hips with a scowl. You became an elf and you're still too big. How is that possible? Lady Shiltir's expression made it seem like she herself was angry over her bust for some reason, but how could that be? Lady Shiltir's gaze shifted to the human beside her. Actually, my lady, Lady Zaradnik said. The Lynam sisters are about that big. They're half-elves, are they not? Lady Shiltir asked. Their mother is the same, Lady Zaradnik answered. My entire household is bigger than I am, actually. The human released a tired sigh that sounded as if a fragment of her soul had escaped with it. Lady Shaltir turned her attention to Ilishnish again. You'll have to do better than that, she said. If this place has wood elves, why not be a stick elf? That sounds suitably slender. A stick elf? I've never heard of that kind of elf. No matter how much she thought about it, the concept of a stick elf failed to manifest in her mind. Do you have to hear about it? Lady Shaltir said, just use your imagination. Do you think there's only one kind of elf? Of course not, my lady, Ilishnish replied. Then, how about a dark elf? No. Why not? I have a feeling things will just become worse. Try again. Ilishnish gave up trying, and the sort of elf that best suited her just formed in her mind on its own. Her voice rose in song again. She grew taller, felt sturdier. She made adjustments to Fuyutsuki based on her new height, adding a midnight blue skirt that was longer and covered more of her legs than the human version. The material of her short coat transformed to match, becoming a soft, dark leather that contrasted against her pale white skin. She opened her eyes a crack to see what sort of expression Lady Shaltir wore. Oh, a snow elf. You're still a bit bigger than her, but the new coat makes it hard to tell. This is just what we needed, I think. Lady Shaltir came over and stood between Ilishnish and Lady Zaradnik. A hand snaked out around Ilishnish's waist, and Ilishnish and the human were pulled in towards Lady Shaltir until they squeezed against her tightly. Oh, this is very good. Lady Shaltir's hands roamed as she leaned her head this way and that with a smile. It's like having a model on both arms. What's a model? Never mind that for now. Lady Shaltir cleared her throat. From this point onwards, you will use your snow elf appearance when you're working directly for me in an official capacity. This includes your duties with Lady Zaradnik. When you're exploring or performing investigations in human lands, or participating in Adventurer Guild activities, you are to use your human appearance. Be sure that similarities in how you present yourself between different races don't clue people into your other identities. I don't understand, Ilishnish said. Why all the fuss about what variety of mortal I appear as? What does it have to do with this reassignment? You do it so naturally, Lady Shaltir said, yet you don't understand what you're doing. I suppose you're like Lady Zaradnik in that sense. It is appeal, the power of your personal image. The both of you would do well to heed my words. Lady Shaltir released her hold on them to walk forward. Her crimson eyes glowed in the night when she turned to face them, and her voice gained an authoritative tone. How others perceive you is independent from how you perceive yourself, she told them. Until you learn how to expertly wield the image by which others perceive you, your image does not belong to you, but to them. They will do what they wish with it, idolize you, fear you, scorn you, slander you, whatever it is, it will be entirely out of your control. You both deliver a strong image naturally, but appear incapable of fully harnessing the power that it gives you over others. Worse yet, you both demonstrate the ability to turn certain aspects of your image in your favor, yet seem mostly unaware of the full breadth of its possibilities. Her attention turned to Lady Zaradnik, who straightened under her scrutiny. The impression that you make is at its strongest when your natural talent as a commander takes over. Lady Shaltir pointed a manicured nail at her. You inspire the confidence, loyalty and adoration of your subordinates as if they were your very own army. The order, stability and security you have established in your domain have the makings of a military base. Actually, you are planning for that in the future, aren't you? Even your enemies on the field seem to have no choice but to fall to the impressions that you cast over them. You have set off on the path of becoming a great captain, yet, it is as if you are being helplessly and unknowingly led along that path by your own ability. Does this not seem absurd? And you, Lady Shaltir leveled her gaze at Ilishnish, you're just as bad, if not worse. Not only are you wrestling with your nature as a frost dragon, but you continually allow the wrong impressions to slip out, and those around you run off with them. Your talent as a bard can either mitigate the damage that this causes, or make it exponentially worse. Lady Shaltir furrowed her brow at her own words, and she crossed her arms. Now that I think about it, she said, the both of you are ridiculous. It's not even a class penalty like my blood frenzy, you're just being compelled into doing what your classes are capable of. Your ability has become your identity. Are all the people around here like this? Is this all that you are? Ludmila Zaradnik, the commander? Verilin, the bard? Of course not. Ilishnish protested. Honestly, I haven't a clue about most of what you said just now, but I am my own person. Then seize control of who you are, Lady Sheltier told her. If you are to serve Ainzul, the supreme sovereign that stands above this world, it would hardly do for you to remain subject to it. After confirming one last time how well they went together, Lady Sheltier teleported away, and Ludmilla was left alone on the riverbank with Verilin. The frost dragon turned snow elf remained where she was, her head turning as she tried to look in every direction at once. It was an indescribable sight, as her true appearance overlapped with her elven one. The dragon head swiveled around so quickly and she thought it might come flying off if it had really been there. Is something the matter? Ludmilla asked. Ilishnish stopped looking around, body visibly tensing as she focused her gaze in her direction. Ludmilla couldn't help but continue to compare her two appearances. The snow elf had irises of bright silver, the frost dragon, glowing topaz. Both blinked in unison at her. Many things are the matter. Ilishnish's voice was filled with complaint. I came here because Lady Sheltier reassigned me, then I got blasted out of the sky by sheep. Now, I'm some human's property. Well, do your worst, human. Ilishnish balled up her fists against her sides and squeezed her eyes shut. Ludmilla wasn't sure what to make of her true appearance. Why are you doing that? She finally said. This is the same thing that happened to my brother, Ilishnish replied in mournful tones. The Sorcerer King gave him to Lady Aura and he ended up as her pet. That's what Lady Sheltier wanted, wasn't it? It's true that rangers sometimes have companions, Ludmilla said, but Lady Aura is the first outside of the legends that I know of having something like a dragon. I'm not something. Ilishnish huffed. How could she be so defiant and resigned at the same time? Ludmilla cleared her throat. The point is that I'm nowhere near powerful enough to tame a dragon like another ranger might tame a wild beast if that's what you were expecting. Oh? Ilishnish peeked at her with one eye before turning her head away. I guess that's too bad, then. If that's the case, we should just forget about it, yes? Don't worry, Ludmilla said. I will do my utmost to carry out Lady Sheltier's instructions. Fortunately for us, there is another way. Ilishnish skittered away at her words, moving all the way to the water's edge. Were dragons really so timid? They looked powerful and majestic when flying over Iranthal. In written histories and bardic renderings both, they were fierce adversaries that could only be defeated by powerful heroes. There were even a few that were styled as gods. Is there a reason to be so frightened? Ludmilla asked in a quizzical voice. You are much more powerful than I am. I have no idea what sort of tricky tricks you have, Ilishnish said. Besides, I have absolutely no desire to be a pet. Then this other method will not work, Ludmilla sighed. It won't? You must be a consenting partner to the relationship. Since you are not willing, I'm definitely not. Is there any particular reason why? How would you feel if you were turned into a pet? Does your brother voice any complaints about being one of Lady Aura's companions? No, but he's probably the closest thing to a deviant among us. Ludmilla restrained a sigh. As eager as she was to get along with her new acquaintance, there was no point in pressing her when they had just met. Even if she learned everything that Lady Sheltier wished of her, Ilishnish had been made a permanent resident of Ludmilla's domain, so they would have plenty of opportunities to interact in the future. Well, Ludmilla moved on. The priority, for now, is to prepare you for your work in the Empire. Will you be taking any issue with that? I don't think so. Good, Ludmilla smiled. Then we will focus on that first. Once we get to know one another better, perhaps you'll change your mind, Abu. No. Ludmilla's cheek twitched. Lady Sheltier was right. Despite the mysterious allure she exuded, this frost dragon demonstrated behaviors that would more easily pass as those of a frontier noble than a prim and proper inner noble. The cold beauty of her snow elf appearance also went well with that impression. It is rude to interrupt, she admonished Ilishnish in calm tones. In addition to mentoring you in the legal framework of the Sorceress Kingdom and its policies, I must ensure that you meet a bare minimum standard of aristocratic knowledge and etiquette as well. What's the purpose of that? Ilishnish furrowed her brow. The Sorceress Kingdom is so ridiculously powerful that all others have no choice but to bend. Why even pretend that rules and behavior even matter? Compared to Chief Isis, who was mostly calm and quiet while receiving instruction, it seemed that Elishnish had no qualms expressing her own ideas about how things should be. Ludmilla supposed that it was the response that a powerful dragon, who was accustomed to being answerable to no one, might give. In human society, however, it was the destructive mindset of criminals and megalomaniacs who could ruin the work of multiple generations in a very short span of time. She understood that the Sorceress Kingdom was not a wholly human society, but they did not employ their unfathomable power in such an arbitrary and reckless manner. His Majesty was held up as a supreme sovereign by Lady Shultier, an absolute ruler, but, with the matchless might of his reign, came order, structure and security. His was a nation where all could find their own place to live and prosper, a civilized society far above both the savagery of demi-human tribes and the pretense of nations that lack the means to enforce their policies. Because they do, Ludmilla told her. His Majesty's laws and policies are to be upheld in every circumstance. This is particularly important for anyone who represents the Sorceress Kingdom in an official capacity, be they a member of the royal court or a sentry in a village crossroads. Lady Shiltier said that I'll be representing her, Elishnish replied. What does the Sorceress Kingdom have to do with anything? Lady Shiltier has her own interests and ambitions, but they are ultimately secondary to His Majesty's will. If you do something that you believe will please Lady Shiltier, but it runs afoul of His Majesty's laws and policies, rather than being pleased, she will be furious. Elishnish's face twisted in befuddlement. Ludmilla observed her true appearance, wondering if her draconic expressions mirrored her humanoid ones. Elishnish peered at her suspiciously. Why do you keep looking around me like that? She asked. I've heard that humans are effectively blind in the dark. Are you just trying to guess where I am by the sound of my voice? I have no issues with seeing in the dark, Ludmilla replied, continuing to compare Elishnish's two appearances. I've read that frost dragons learn better through experience. Is this true? Yes. How about we do that, then? Do what? I will induct you into the aristocracy of the Sorceress Kingdom, Ludmilla said, as a titled member of the gentry. Rather than having to rely on texts, verbal instruction, and the imitation of behavior, you will learn everything required of your position by practicing it in truth. Achieving the conduct expected of a member of the gentry should fulfill most of Lady Shultier's requirements for dealing in the Empire. Is that something you can do? I am legally entitled to do so, Ludmilla nodded. With the advent of the Sorceress Kingdom, however, there's been no real need to exercise this power for its original purpose. Elishnish fell silent, her face painted with a look of intense concentration. She tilted her head back and forth in thought, then looked Ludmilla straight in the eye. I have no idea what you're talking about, the dragon said. Not only was she more difficult than Chief Isis, she knew far less on the subject matter and arbitrarily rejected what she didn't agree with. At what point did she need to be poked? Ludmilla stood silently amidst the sounds of the wind and the current, trying to figure out how she could convey herself effectively to Elishnish. I will be granting you a portion of my land, Ludmilla explained. Your right of this land's ownership is called a title. With this title will come a contract outlining the rights and obligations that must be maintained for as long as you hold it. Primarily, it is to provide you with a suitable residence, so it should not be too complicated. In addition, you will learn what you need to learn through practical experience as one who holds a title. Since you are a dragon, there will probably be a number of special dispensations, but the contract between us should be roughly similar to what a knight holds. A knight? Elishnish started wringing her hands. Me? Do I have to go around riding a horse, slaying other dragons? Those are just stories, Ludmilla smirked. In reality, a knight is normally granted their title in exchange for military service. Many regular knights indeed aspire to the more traditional image attributed to them, but it is not required. One only needs to be able to fulfill their obligations to retain their title, and powerful individuals can do so through their own means. To be frank, a dragon is something like an ideal knight for a border territory, though this notion would probably never cross the minds of most. Far from it, a nation would probably hire adventurers or field their champions in an attempt to kill the dragon, or at least drive it away. Had it actually been a missed opportunity this entire time? The Arglant Confederation on Riestize's northwestern border was presided over by a council of dragons, so it was hard to imagine that the thought hadn't occurred to someone at some point. Then again, it was generally untenable for a noble to have a vassal that they couldn't suppress if they decided to rebel. The worry in Ilishnish's expression grew as Ludmilla spoke, and she looked about to cry. You're going to make me fight? You will be obligated to render military service. Do dragons not defend their territory? They do, sort of. Ilishnish said, we have arranged that we may or may not share with others, depending on who they are. Our old range in the Azalizia Mountains was filled with other peoples, the only ones we truly fought were the frost giants. Everything else was beneath our notice. I see. I always thought that dragons would be more competitive when it came to their territory. Our territories are vast, Ilishnish said, so it matters little if one tribe or another, or even a whole nation, exists within our territories. We only really fight things that represent a threat to us, maybe not even then. I've recently come across some horrible stories where a dragon has been quietly living its life somewhere for centuries and some upstart human nation sends assassins after them. It all appears self-serving to me. They even prop up the assassin as a hero. One day I'll find the bigot who comes up with these shameless fabrications and have a word with them. Ludmilla briefly tried to imagine a world where dragons were the victims of unwarranted aggression, then shook her head. They were digressing from the topic at hand. As a frontier noble, my principal obligation is to defend the border of the Sorceress Kingdom from intruders. As the knight of a frontier noble, your duties would be to assist me in this. Honestly, the most valuable service you might be able to render in this regard is more related to a dragon's mobility and keen senses. If you do not wish to fight personally, you can still identify threats and bring them to the attention of the undead security forces. I'll have power over Death Knights and Elder Liches? Ilishnish perked up a bit. It is not your power, Ludmilla told her. It is the authority vested in you to allow you to perform your duties in His Majesty's name. His Majesty's servitors will heed your orders in light of this. Be cautioned, however, abuse of authority will, at the least, lead to the loss of it. If your transgression is severe enough, you will be executed. Ilishnish cringed away with a whimper. Ludmilla fixed her with a stern look. This is the price of a title, the obligations that come with your rights and powers. If Lady Shaltir says that you are to represent her, you must be capable of managing at least this much. The power of the Sorceress Kingdom can shatter empires overnight. Those entrusted with the direction of its power must be capable of wielding it appropriately. Do you mean to say that every noble in the Sorceress Kingdom has this power? Ilishnish asked. Even the really weak ones that you see in the city? No, Ludmilla shook her head. Regular nobles do hold a degree of this authority in their respective territories, but only frontier nobles maintain a contract that allows them to exercise this power beyond their borders. Does that mean I can go out and pillage our neighbors under you? Why did she go straight to that? Wasn't she frightened of everything? The question was something still undergoing deliberations in the royal court. The subjects of the Sorceress Kingdom were not allowed to eat fellow subjects, though exceptions for special relationships like the one shared by the Kronos did exist, but how subjects treated non-subjects outside of the Sorceress Kingdom's borders was a matter of some debate. The Sorceress Kingdom had a benign and mostly open foreign policy and desired to promote itself as a safe and civilized nation that stood superior to all others. While it was accepted by the royal court that different races and cultures had their own customs and behaviors, belligerent acts conducted by their subjects against other nations would be decidedly detrimental to that image. Thus, as far as could be determined, the Sorceress Kingdom's subjects were only allowed a free hand in territories unmanaged by any recognized nation. The three regions of note in the vicinity were the Katza Plains, which was a cursed wasteland where nothing lived, the Abelian Wilderness, and most of the Azalizia Mountains, as the majority of the Dwarf Kingdom was underground. You will learn what is appropriate and what is not during the course of your instruction, Ludmilla said. I believe it would be best to start with the basics that you should be able to immediately grasp. Yes, let's do that. Then first, we should find you a suitable domain. Is there some place you would prefer to make your home? I do not have the fancy rooms that they built in Irantal, but I do have a lot of undeveloped land. Some place high and cool, Ilishnish said. Actually, it doesn't need to be cool. Our lairs will freeze over time as long as they are claimed. Is that why the wall under the dragon area in the city is frozen? It is, Ilishnish nodded. We were told to refrain from doing any more than that, though. Then, Ludmilla turned to point over the river to the southeast. How about that mountain? It is the highest peak in the Eastern Barrier Range. You can even cool it down as much as you wish. The mountain she indicated dominated the southeastern quarter of the horizon, looming high above the southern half of Warden's Vale. Above the tree line, its bare heights resembled a towering fortress, and the winter snows that accumulated upon it did not fully melt away until midsummer. It had a story-like quality to it that begged the imagination to populate it with all manner of powerful creatures. Ludmilla figured that she may as well house one there in truth. Rather than a knight that slew dragons or a knight that rode dragons, her knight would be a dragon. It felt like just the thing one might expect out of a nation like the Sorceress Kingdom. Ah, really? Ilishnish's gaze followed Ludmilla's gesture. The whole mountain. Is it too much? And not at all. Ilishnish stepped forward to take Ludmilla's hands in hers. I'll take it. Then it will be yours to manage in my name, Ludmilla smiled. The way this has all come about has been rather unconventional, and there are still many details to work out, but I look forward to a long and fruitful relationship together with you, Dame Verilyn.